Today on Ignite Agility, I want to share a story with you that happened in a recent certified Scrum product owner class. But first, if you are loving our practical advice and our practical content, check out the comments below because we've recorded a lot of it on demand and we put those on sale. So you can just do it at your own pace, in your own place, rewind and listen as many times as you want. Check it out. Okay, here's what happened. In a certified Scrum product owner class, I had a student ask me, how many people do anything resembling actual Scrum anymore in your experience? I said, oh boy, that is a loaded question to ask someone like me. And I get that I'm going to sound like the old lady in the community when I answer it. But the truth is, this year is my 20th year working this way. And in the last 20 years, have I seen a lot? And I told this student, I would have answered this question completely differently 20 years ago. 20 years ago, and even 10 years ago, when I was consulting and helping people from my own business actually do this, I could have rattled off the names of clients of mine off the top of my head. Even some of them were giving tours and being testimonies and references for how to work this way. I had a ton of those. Today, nope, not so much. And this student was a little baffled. They're like, why? What happened? And I said, well, in my opinion or in my experience, I can share with you the three things that I've seen happen. And the very first thing that started to happen when I was working as a scrum master and then as a coach, one of the things that was beat into my brain by the people who wrote the Agile Manifesto for software development or who really were the innovators in this space was that coaching was supposed to be temporary. You shouldn't need somebody called Agile coach indefinitely. Think about it for a second. Why would you have to hire more people to change the way you do work and you need those people indefinitely? Doesn't even make sense. Doesn't even make common sense. So the goal was to always work ourselves out of a job. And we would tell clients that. We would be like, hey, as soon as you sustain your own agility, we're out. Because if Scrum is your chosen way of doing work, there is a Scrum Master. You've got your coach. If extreme programming is your chosen way of doing work, there's an XP coach. You've got that person. So somebody more experienced should only be needed temporarily. And then once you got this, you're good to go. And we're on to the next thing. But the last thing staffing firms and large consulting firms want to hear is that they're not needed because they judge themselves based on their billable hours, utilization. So the last thing they want to hear from a client is, great, you've taught us how to fish for ourselves. We no longer need your services. And so the agile industrial machine took hold of this thing called agile coaching and completely subverted what it was supposed to mean. Now, there are friends of mine who work for some of those firms who will dig their heels in, kicking and screaming, and say, not true, just because it's a year-long contract and I'm at that big company helping as an agile coach, I'm moving from team to team after 6 sprints or 6 iterations or something. Sure, that's a little different, but then I would expect you to be done after that 1 year. But no, they're renewed. And when I check in with some of them, no, I'm still working with the same team that I was working with 8 months ago. What? Talk about no continuous improvement, no growth. Complacency is the goal. And even worse, a lot of HR departments or organizations who only understand hierarchy treated agile coaching as if it were some sort of stepping stone, or some way to promote somebody called Scrum Master, and created some sort of hierarchy within their organization. All the Scrum Masters now report to this person called Agile Coach. That's not what it was intended to mean. And that doesn't mean that somebody working as an Agile coach doesn't need experience. Of course. I got experience working as a Scrum Master before I could help other people work this way. But to say that you need an Agile coach indefinitely, just was so far from what was intended, it's not even funny. So that's one thing. Big industrial machine took over. The second thing, enter the tools companies, and I mean software tools. The very first value of the Agile Manifesto is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. All of a sudden, I started hearing about this thing called version one and another thing called Rally. And they have different names today, Agile Central, whatever. But then tools that were around for a very different purpose have all of a sudden morphed into agile tools. Jira was a bug tracking tool. Even in some of my late waterfall projects, it was a bug tracking tool used in help desks or call centers. But all of a sudden, it's got agile lingo plastered all over it, and it's now an agile tool. And people think they need to install a tool to be agile. Oh, it just hurts because it just completely contradicts the very first value that we're looking for. And so what happens is people come to my classes and they have definitely caught a condition called toolitis. All I hear out of them is a bunch of tool speak. Feature, epic, story, task, and then when we start talking about what's really intended, they say really silly things to me like, well, this is the way the tool makes me do it. I mean, seriously, little hands come out of the screen and grab you by the collar. The tool can't make you do anything. I mean, common sense has really taken a permanent vacation. What happened is somebody at that company chose that software tool and they installed it one way. The tool isn't evil, the tool just gets misused. It is completely configurable, but the company skips that part. They set it up one way and then they push that out to every single agile team in the company and killed their agility. Absolutely micromanaged process via a tool to all the individuals and interactions. There is no way, there is no hope of that organization ever being agile. They're doing a bunch of busy work, a lot of waste that generally adds no value. And yes, I picture myself being in one of my team's favorite memes where there's the little grandma with her walker and a young girl walking next to said grandma. And grandma is saying, I was on many Scrum teams where we didn't use software, we used Post its. And the girl says, come on, grandma, let's get you back to your room. But it's true. Back in the day when I worked with some amazingly productive, creative Scrum teams who were the epitome of agile, pivoting, turning on a dime for a dime. There was none of that tool nonsense. But boy, those tool companies don't want to hear that either because then they don't make any money. They can't have you using a tool that you already pay a license for. Crazy talk. So either some of the companies out there just have an awful lot of money to waste, or something was lost in translation. So toolitis is the second reason I see that agility and anything resembling intended Scrum has just been squashed here in the year 2025. And the third reason, people just don't want to. If you think about where we're at, the first Scrum team was in 1993, second one shortly thereafter. The early extreme programming teams were in the late 90s. 17 gentlemen got together in 2001 and wrote down some of their common ideas that they had been working with throughout the 90s. So, if an organization was going to be an innovator in this space, it's already happened. If you think of the law of diffusion of innovation, that bell curve that talks about innovators, the people who have to be the first, early adopters, early majority, we are over 30 years into Scrum's existence. If people were going to be the first or wanted to be the innovators to really work that way, that has happened. We're at the end of the bell curve, in my experience and in my opinion. We are into late adopters and laggards. By definition, people who are late to the party or who just don't want to change, laggards, they're going to go kicking and screaming. And so you can't really talk about a lot of this change because it scares them. So if they were going to do it, they already would have. So it's almost like they're just hopping on the bandwagon now with a lot of the buzzwords or the buzzword compliance management that's going on out there. And so there's just this resistance to change. And it's not all companies, but in my experience, it's the ones that have existed for 30, 40 years that were born in the age of the waterfall. The companies that were born in the age of Agile already work this way. And you know that they work this way because they're crushing their competitors. They deliver valuable product daily. They pivot in the face of market conditions or in the face of competition. They pivot. They're agile. And startups organically are this way. So it's not necessarily all companies, that have been around forever and ever and ever. There's new companies on the horizon who are just new to some of this lingo, but they naturally work this way. And so sometimes they don't even use all the scrummy or agile language. Why would they? This is just the way they do work. So what can you do about it? So maybe you're listening to this and getting a little depressed. And that my poor student, right? I'm like, totally would have answered you differently 20 years ago. The short answer today is no, I don't see a lot of companies leveraging Scrum as intended or even remotely doing anything that looks like Scrum. And so as my students, they were like, "Oh, well, then what are we supposed to do? Like we're here learning about it. And now we're excited about it. So what do we do?" The very first thing that I always tell people, and some of you have heard me say this before in the face of the agile industrial machine, is don't get into the agile wars or the scrum wars with anybody. Because a lot of times people throw up all the scrummy language and agile vocabulary, and it makes people defensive. And there's also this, my scrum is better than your scrum, or my agile is better than your agile. That's not right. You're doing it wrong. Those phrases are not helpful. So, my first piece of advice is to eliminate those from your vocabulary. Do not say that to your coworkers. Do not say, "We're doing it wrong. We're not doing it right." All you're going to do is make them defensive. You've triggered their fight or flight, their amygdala, and they're just busy fighting you. No, don't do that. One of our values in Scrum is openness. Another one of our values is respect. There's ways you can do those translations in your head without even saying the word Scrum, without even saying the word Agile. Let me give you an example. You don't need to say daily Scrum. And for the love of God, don't call it a stand up. Scrum doesn't call it a stand up. No, it's a daily Scrum. Hey, could we get together for 15 minutes or less and just check in and see if we're on track for our goal? You don't have to say Scrum. You don't need to say demo, which it hasn't been called that either for many, many years. It's been called sprint review, and it's just your stakeholder management. Hey, we've got a stakeholder status on the calendar, right? We should probably show them, give them a little glimpse, a little show and tell into what we're doing. So it's so much easier to just exercise a lot of common sense if you're trying to move people closer to agility than to come in with a sledgehammer. And the agile industrial machine has definitely subverted or ruined a lot of the vocabulary anyway. So just use really, really common words and talk about what's important because hopefully that's what you care about in your organizations. The goal isn't using perfect scrum or using perfect agile. Who cares? Are we meeting our goals and objectives? Are we not meeting our goals and objectives? That's really all it's about. The tool speak. Whew. If you must use a tool, and I'm not saying they're bad, but you gotta get with whoever is the administrator face to face. Get on a Zoom call, get on a Microsoft Teams call, get on a phone call if you have to, but talk to them about how the tool is configured because they are all 100% configurable and they may not even know. You may say, "Hey, thank you so much for helping us out with this instance of the software that we're using to manage our work, but it doesn't really meet our needs. It's actually impeding our ability to reach our goals and objectives. And I just want to talk to you to see if there's a way we can configure it so that it better supports my team." That's what a talented Scrum Master would do. That's what an effective coach or scrum master would do, not micromanage people and trot out templates and tool speak at people. So you've got to get with who your tool administrator is and figures out how to configure that instance. So that's the second thing I would leave you with here today. And lastly, what do you do with these late adopters and laggards? They just don't wanna. I don't know about you, but I have yet to figure out how to change free will. So if somebody says, I don't wanna, good luck. If you figure it out, share with me. But you can warm people up to the idea of change. So instead of coming in big bang, talking about all the change that Scrum requires structurally and behaviorally, pick your battles, do a little change, try something, and then build on that success and try something else. For example, many of you know Scrum is all about product, it's not about project. Well, instead of recoiling in horror when people still use the word project in your context, instead of saying, oh, that's not right, I just smile and nod and okay, let's call it a project. But we are going to try something different. Instead of making people chase work, we're going to bring work to people in an ordered manner. You don't have to say something like, well, the team needs to be 100% dedicated, otherwise, it's not Scrum. We're going to stop making people chase work. We're going to let people focus on the highest valued item, and then we'll move on to the next one. And then we'll move on to the next one. So we've got that focused team and we're ordering their work. You are going to see an immediate jump in productivity from the sheer act of focusing. But when you make people chase different pieces of work, it's called context switching. And the data that's been freely available on the internet for decades shows it is a drop in productivity. And then the minute we see that immediate jump in productivity, wow, how did you all figure that out? Or how did you guys accomplish that so fast? Oh, let us share that with you. We're working a little bit differently. And then you could try something else and try something else. But to come in big bang and expect laggards or late adopters to just be open to changing at all, not really reading the room. So you're going to have to be really, really aware, which Scrum Masters are. Talented Scrum Masters have that people chip, right? We're people geeks. So hopefully this has been an enlightening bit of information courtesy of one of my very smart students who asked an intelligent question in our workshop. And if you want to attend one of our workshops, check us out at collaborativeleadershipteam.com.